Welcome to this episode of Dead Last, the show where we rank all of your favorite horror movies. And today's episode it's pretty diverse because we're talking about horror anthologies, which are short stories told with a linking wraparound. And we've actually chosen these 10 movies to rank. And you might say, hey, that's a pretty random assortment of movies. And you're right, since we threw over 50 different options into a hat, and we randomly selected these 10 on a patron Zoom feed. And at that point, we then ranked all the selected films. And when I say we, I mean my patrons on patreon.com, and these guys answered the call and send in their rankings. And I've also recruited the help of my panel here, which actually includes one of the patrons this time, and this anthology concept was actually her idea. So welcome to the show, Sarah.
Hey, Josh. Thanks for having me.
We're glad to have you. And Sarah does extensive bunch of voice acting and actually does a lot of really great writing as well, which you can check out on your website, which is
therosebride.com.
All right. Well, we can go there and check that out. And we're glad to have you on a part of this. It'll be fun.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Also rejoining us is the great Maddie, who's been on several episodes so far. Always glad to have you back. And Matt, thank you for coming back on board.
Oh man, I love this, Josh. I have so much fun doing these. So.
Well, I'm glad. We love to have you. And Matt, I have to tell everybody, if you have not checked out, Matt has a new YouTube show called Crypto Hunter. But you got to go check it out. What made you come up with what made you come up with this concept?
I love ghost stories. I love true ghost stories, especially. So it's kind of a way to get people that I know to talk about their experiences with the supernatural. And then I do like a little skit show just about various ghosts throughout, history and their background. And then I kind of do like a little comedy thing with it. And I don't know, I just do it for fun. I do it for me. I'm having a good time with it,
And finally on our panel, coming back from last month's episode, is the star of the complex. It's Clay. Welcome back, Clay.
Hello, Josh. It is so great to be back. I'm very excited about this episode.
Clay also does a lot of commercial acting. You said you have something coming out this week.
Yes. If you're in the Southeast region, you may have heard of one of those like payday advance stores called Amscott. And I've got a series of Amscott commercials that hit TVs this week.
Well, okay, let's get to the actual ranking of the anthology films here. Again, we had 21 entrants this time, so the best score that a movie can possibly have here would be 21 points, and the absolute worst that it could do would be 210 points. So let's see how these films stacked up. Coming in at dead last, I don't think this is going to surprise you guys, with 184 points, is Snoop Dogg's Hood of Horror. This movie was ranked dead last 10 times, and its best ranking that it got was actually 5th place. So it did get a 5th place ranking in there. But on the panel, all 4 of us ranked it as dead last. So we were pretty unanimous with how we felt about this one.
Well, I'm just going to say I didn't hate any movie on this list. Okay, this is just the one that was like, okay, it's really not that great. The acting's terrible. Even like the cinematography looks cheap. But I thought the animation parts were really cool. I really like the animation. And I love over-the-top racist characters. And the guy in that middle segment is so horribly racist that I was laughing my ass off the entire time. I like Snoop Dogg. I did a music video with him when I was first out in LA. He's like the nicest dude. I didn't hate it. I had fun, a lot of laughs. It wasn't scary, but all in all, good time.
How they were able to get all of these high B type actors in this movie was kind of strange to me. How they were able to snag Lando Calrissian. I know he's not busy all the time, but come on, that was kind of crazy. And then to get Ernie Hudson in the second segment and George Costanza. How what agent let George Costanza be in this movie? I think I was more upset with this movie for the actors. Like, who did you like piss off to have to be in this movie? Because I would have been pissed off to be in this movie. Much love, much respect to the OG Snoop Doggy Dogg. We love him. Not his movie though.
I completely agree. The animation for this was fantastic. If the whole movie had been animated, I think this would have ended up in a very different spot on this list. But as soon as it switched to live action, everything just went downhill. I was like, okay, this is interesting. I liked the last one, the last act with the two rappers and their whole story, and then Lin Shaye as an angel. Okay, great. We got Lin Shaye and we've got Jason Alexander, who I love. But I liked that last one. The other two just felt very mean-spirited to me. And I have a hard time with mean-spirited stuff. Like, I love a wink and a nod. And like, you're in on the joke. But when it feels like they're just being mean to be mean, it just kind of rubs me the wrong way. He killed the puppy. Why? Why? It's not the dog's fault that his owners were racist. The dog's being a good little dog. He's getting along with the old guys. He's bringing a little bit of joy. Why did you kill the dog?
Well, I will say one of the things that I really considered when ranking any of these movies was how well they tied together and what the wraparound did to it. Because otherwise it's just a bunch of short stories. And the wraparounds, I think, have a very crucial part in tying everything together. So you've got Snoop Dogg as your wraparound character who should be linking these together. And he's essentially like a crypt keeper character, but it's kind of unclear of what he is. Is he supposed to be Snoop? I mean, he's kind of like a reporter at one point. He's a landlord at one point. He's kind of everything, and it's kind of odd. Because I also feel like he's supposed to be Snoop Dogg as we know him. The acting was really bad, and there was good actors in the movie, but they were giving really poor performances. Everything felt really poorly staged. So to the point that I really want I find I have to fault the director here, and I feel kind of bad because she died last year, and this one, it didn't tick any of those boxes. It wasn't well done. And just from an anthology standpoint, I don't really feel as if it had that cohesive tie together that I wanted from one of these things. So just very deserving of its dead last spot. Moving on to number 9 on the list. There was actually this one in Hood of Horror were in close contention for a little while there. I will say at the very beginning it looked as if Hood of Horror was a shoo-in for the dead last. But then it started getting some more favorable numbers and it looked like it might be a close call, but then the last bunch of rankings kind of blew it out. So at number 9 with 176 points is Galaxy of Horrors, which was ranked dead last 5 times. Half the amount of times as a Hood of Horror, and its best ranking also was 5th place. On the panel, Sarah seemed to like this one the least. She had it in 9th place. Clay and I liked it a little bit more in 8th place, and Maddie, I think you got the most enjoyment out of this one with 6th place. So Sarah, since this was you were the lowest ranked one on this, how did you feel about Galaxy of Horrors?
It took me 2 sessions to get through this. Eden seemed like it wanted to be more than a short film. I liked it. It was interesting. And I liked the one Iris with the talking phone with the AI in it. Flesh Computer did me in. I'm sitting there and I'm going, do I have to watch this? It was a weird little thing. And then Pathos, I was just like, by the end of it, I was so depressed. I was like, I got to go watch something happy. I will come back to this later. And then when I came back to it, the very next segment had a friend of mine in it. My friend Vin is in the one Eveless. And I was just so surprised, pleasantly so. And I was like, it's Vin! And then after that, like the ones after Flesh Computer and Pathos were actually really interesting. I liked them a lot, especially They Will All Die in Space. Like that one was so cool. So overall, did I rank it ninth? Yes, because I liked other things a little bit more, but it wasn't that horrible. Like it didn't work for me as an anthology.
I think in terms of an anthology movie, this one is pretty much what you usually get from an anthology. It's a bunch of short stories, some of which you like, some of which you don't like. There were some in here that were definitely better than others, and there were some in here that just were, obviously not that great. But yeah, that cohesion of like a unified theme and a flowing of them together, it really didn't feel like it was there at all. They were stylistically different, narratively different. They were just very different movies, and the reason why I found out is because that these were not made together in any way, shape, or form. These were short films that already existed, that were curated, and then the wraparound sequence was shot to bridge them together a little bit. And because of that, it doesn't really feel like a solid like flow.
And I really like that because you get different directors, different visions for every single one. It's kind of like a salad bar. You know, okay, this one wasn't that good. I really like this one. This one's kind of lame. This one's kind of great. And I wouldn't have gotten to see these films if it wasn't for this kind of wraparound. I'm not like gonna go and look these up. I wouldn't even know where to start. So I think they need to do more of this. Honestly, could give these guys, these directors, these actors, a chance to be seen. Overall, I had fun with it, and a lot of them were really, really ambitious, even though they probably didn't have the budget, And I don't know. I really like the Iris one with the cell phone. I thought that was really well done. Really good gore effects. The acting was great in that one. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Really did.
While I do agree with everything Maddie said, I really appreciate the opportunity to get to see different directors. And you know what? Actually, the acting wasn't all that terrible, except from the guy in the wraparound. Especially the girl out in space. She's a terrific actress. I mean, you think about she's acting by herself, and she has to get those sight shots when she's not looking at anything. And I liked actually watching some of the film in a different language, because it's cool to see how other countries see horror. Which is why Kings was probably one of my favorites, because I thought, wow, this would make a great TV show. I would watch this as a series. Yes, I did not like the non-cohesiveness of it. So appreciate the storytelling, but not the movie as a whole.
All right, well then that will actually jump us up to our next item on the list. At number 8, coming in with 137 points, is 1989's After Midnight, not to be confused with 2019's After Midnight. But this one was actually ranked dead last only twice, and its best score that it got was second place. On the panel, I had it ranked the lowest in 9th place. Matt had it also pretty low at 8th place. Clay, you had it a little higher at 7th, and Sarah at 6th place.
I love the wraparound story for how bad it is. Like, there is no way that this is a good movie, but I get a lot of enjoyment from how bad this movie is. And I love Marg Helgenberger, her segment, when she's having to deal with this crazy stalker guy. And I love a good haunted house horror. So the fact that they were going into this place that's possibly haunted and he's getting freaked out, and she clearly is not freaked out at all. And just his reactions to everything that's going on, and then that ending, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so over the top. It's so hysterically funny to me. And even the ending with the guy turning into a burnt skeleton and just chasing everybody Harryhausen style, it's just I'm like, this is genius. It's hysterically bad, but I love it to pieces. It's so much fun for me.
First of all, I don't think I've ever seen Mark McClure in anything other than the Superman movies and Back to the Future, and he showed up in 2 different of these films. I was also really happy to see Pamela Adlon otherwise known as Bobby. Bobby Hill. I love her to pieces, and it was so cool seeing a young Pamela in the film. I didn't quite understand how Pamela got sucked into the fire at the end of the film. I didn't know, like, that's some strong backdraft going on. I didn't see a vortex or anything show up. The individual stories were pretty good. I don't know. I guess I was more invested in the wraparound altogether because I was just so entirely confused. And you know, the 80s style hunk just showing up and he's ready to bring an axe, all because this guy embarrassed him and made him piss his pants in the class. So that's why it got 7th place and higher than the other films.
I actually enjoy After Midnight. I thought it was a fun movie. But I think when compared to rest of these ones in this list, I got the least out of it. It is fun. The 80s vibe in it is great. But for me, the stories were all so, like, base level. You kind of knew what the ending was going to be from the minute the movie starts. So there's really no surprise there. All the stories felt very overly simplistic, and I think that, like, it presented itself in almost like a Twilight Zone-y kind of a way, that these stories should have had some sort of a twist or some sort of other thing happen, and then it's just everything kind of happens the way you expected it to. So there just wasn't really any surprise for me, and everything just felt very surface level. So I got the least amount of kick out of it. But yeah, it just kind of felt stale. Although you know, the house that they're in the first story is the same house from House 2, the second story. So interesting factoid if anyone cares.
Look, I don't want anyone to get me wrong. I love this movie. And all these movies on this list are like comfort food. They're like Kraft mac and cheese. Okay, it's the movies you see on HBO in like the middle of the night, and you're all by yourself, and maybe it's raining outside, and you just cozy up and you watch these movies. And this movie is so much fun. Like, you got Zaddy, who looks like Chris Sarandon from Fright Night. Okay, that's all I can think about when I'm looking at this guy. I'm like, and he's obviously a good special effects artist because he's blowing his brain out in his own classroom. And I'm like, that's a really good effect. This guy's got talent. And then, you know, the warehouse full of dogs that get blown up. The only thing I could think of was the newspaper headline, like 3 girls blow up warehouse full of dogs. And I was like dying, cracking myself up. Like, this is just ridiculous. But you're still having a good time. But yeah, loved it.
All right, bouncing up to number 7 here with 131 points. This one is a pretty contentious choice here at number 7, which is Grim Prairie Tales, which was ranked dead last once, but was also ranked number 1 once. So obviously some pretty broad ranges of opinions on this one. Clay and Matt, you guys actually had this pretty low in 9th place. Sarah a little bit higher with 7th place. And I had it the highest. I actually had it at 5th place. And I feel like I need to defend that because I had seen this when I was younger, and I haven't seen this probably for a long time. And so this was a fun rewatch. And kind of surprised me. First of all, the cast of this movie is just phenomenal. And the reason why I gave this a higher ranking is the wraparound and how cohesive of a movie this felt to me. And this is probably the only time on this entire list that I could not wait for the stories to end to get back to that wraparound, because you had Brad Dourif and James Earl Jones sitting around talking to each other and trying to one-up each other. The stories were fine. I mean, there was nothing in there that really stood out as being amazing. But I just thought as an anthology storyline and cohesive experience, I thought it was better than I had expected.
You said it. That wraparound, I couldn't wait. I love James Earl Jones. I could listen to that guy talk for hours. He's a great actor. And you got Brad Dourif, and they're acting against each other, and it's so entertaining. And then you cut to these stories that are just basic. Super basic for me. I'm like, okay, you know, there's some interesting ideas at play, but for the most part, I mean, a guy gets buried alive. the demon that sucks men in, literally, is probably the most interesting of the stories. That it was actually like, okay, well, that's something new. The last story, it's not even a Tales from the Crypt episode. That's just, to me, kind of lazy. I'm like, get back to James Earl Jones. I want to see more of that man. I enjoyed it. I just didn't think on this list it was the most interesting of them, unfortunately. I think the story should have been a little more, had a little more meat to them. That's all, really.
Just such great acting throughout. We get to see Dave McFly again in probably the best of those three tales. But that none of that was interesting to me. Give me all the James, give me all the Brad talking on a campfire, trying to scare the crap out of each other. Although none of those stories would scare anybody. And James Earl Jones, he was like the first actor that I voice doubled. So I mean, I love him. Mufasa, Darth Vader, like you can't go wrong with those two. And for that reason, for those two only, the movie was okay for me. But because of quality and because it is an anthology and the stories in between are just not good, it had to go somewhere.
Those two, the chemistry between them on screen, even as bad as that rip was on YouTube, they lit it up. Like you cannot deny the fantastic energy those two had and the fun you could tell that they were having just playing these parts. And it was so enjoyable. I would have given it a higher ranking if it hadn't been beaten out by other stuff just because of those two. I mean, it was lovely. And I really do wish there was a DVD because I would buy it in a heartbeat.
I can't believe that we've all managed to make it through without anybody discussing what actually happens to Jimmy Olsen. So now we're going on to number 6. A pretty close call with number 7, as number 7 was 131 points, and number 6 with 127 points is Ghost Stories, which was similar in terms of how split it was, because it was ranked dead last twice, but it was also ranked number 1 twice, which I thought was an interesting thing. On the panel, again, pretty split decisions. I had this ranked the lowest. I had it in 6th place. Clay and Sarah both had it in 5th place. And Matt, you had it in 4th place. Clay, you've got this in 5th place. How did you feel about Ghost Stories?
So I really, really, really enjoyed this entire movie up until the end. They had done such a good job for me. They had done right by me. I was clapping. I was so ready to see what they were going to have in store for me. Martin Freeman takes off the mask. I'm like, oh crap, here we go. We've got some like horror Truman Show thing going on. And then the end was just such a letdown and such an easy, low-hanging fruit type of ending that anybody could have come up with. I didn't expect it because they had done such a good job keeping me entertained. I didn't think they were going to grab so low as to just have him be a guy in a coma. I thought that was really kind of weak. And that's why it didn't get higher. And really it should have gone higher on my list. But that ending was grossly unfortunate. And this was the only movie that actually got a good jump out of me. But I also scare very easily. So
I love Martin Freeman. I think he's fantastic. Huge fan. I also like Andy Nyman. I mean, just to see him play this very sympathetic character, at least for me. I mean, clearly he's had some sort of trauma in his life and he's looked up to this guy and suddenly he's being handed these stories that he doesn't know why. And it's very much, I can tell that it was for the stage because of the way that it's structured. But that ending the ending is what lets you down. But I had seen this before. So watching it back through, I knew the things to look for. And they were very smart in the way that they dotted those little I's and crossed the T's and gave you these little flashes that you get to find out what those flashes are by the end of it. So that made it a little more forgivable.
This movie is really well made. It's directed well. The cinematography is fantastic. This is probably one of the most atmospheric movies that I've seen in a long time. It just generally has this great feeling of dread throughout, but then the script just doesn't pay off. It does a lot of great things because this is an anthology movie. It's an anthology movie that, because of the way that it's handled and written with the wraparound, it tricks you into not realizing that you're watching an anthology movie, which I thought was very clever. I'm not really that invested in the characters. I think part of it is because I'm a little bit biased about movies. I know that in the ending of this movie it ends up being not this, but I'm kind of tired of movies about skeptics that are going in to try and disprove supernatural things and then are proven wrong, because that's not what happens in the real world. Because, and it's just, I feel like almost every other horror movie is somebody going in and being like, I'm going to prove that there's no ghost. And then, of course, there is a ghost. But I'm kind of tired of that. And I think that maybe that played a little bit into me not being that invested into this storyline a little bit more.
The acting's great. And I love how, like Sarah said, they have these little things that come back at the very end. And I really, really enjoy the wraparound on this one because it's really not ghosts. It's more the ghosts that haunt us in our minds, in our conscience, like the things we wish we could take back, or the things that we want to go back and do over, or maybe treat this person a little nicer, or maybe I should have helped that person back then. Everybody on earth, I think, has those feelings. And not everybody on earth has had an experience of supernatural. And the guy at the end of this is obviously just tormented. And that's why he's trying to prove that ghosts aren't real, is because he's afraid that if ghosts are real, then there is going to be all these consequences, right? So I don't know. I just really thought, like, the way that they set it up and the way they wrapped it around, and I don't know, it stuck with me. I thought it was very powerful the way they did it. I know it's cliche in a lot of respect, but I don't know. It gave me chills. It made me think, like, oh yeah, this is some real stuff.
But I'm also really glad, because for some reason I thought that this part of it would just descend into me and Matt sitting here and Matt going, go surreal, and me going, nuh-uh, and him going, yeah-huh.
That was close though, man. That was real close.
But ghosts are real, so
thank you, Clark.
All right, so that'll bring us into the top half of the list as we move on to the number 5 movie here, breaking the 100-point range. With 99 points, we have the classic Body Bags, featuring John Carpenter as the Crypt Keeper, I guess. The lowest ranking that this movie had was 9th place, making this the first movie on our list to not get ranked dead last, and it was ranked number 1 3 times. On the panel, Sarah had it ranked the lowest at 8th place. Me and Matt both had it in 7th place, and Clay vehemently disagreed because he had it in 1st place. So Clay, I want to hear what made Body Bags your number 1.
The acting is phenomenal. Stacy Keach is a fantastic actor. I'm shocked that he did not do more in his life, because he's the sheer excitement when he's undoing his gauze and gets that hair and him talking himself up with the hair is just such great acting in a film that should not have great acting in it at all. So I loved all 3 of the segments, and I even tweeted Mr. Mark Hamill himself expressing how I saw his Hamill snatch. You see everything, like it's like they had flashlights on their junk, like there are no shadows, no nothing.
You do see both thermal detonators.
Both of them. The lightsaber was trying to make it in to the Death Star. I mean, it was all there. I loved the wraparound with Carpenter being the kind of dead crypt keeper, drinking the formaldehyde. It's just so weird and funky, and it vibed with me. And Body Bags is number one for me, baby. I loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it.
Even though it is enjoyable, it never really gets into that point of memorable to me. Like, all the stories are fun, but none of them are really groundbreaking to the point of that it just like sticks out. I will say that the first segment to me was just so much fun to watch, just because it was Lewis from Revenge of the Nerds there. Wes Craven pops up. American Werewolf and Werewolf is there. Gilbert pops in. Buck Flowers there. Ted Raimi shows up. It's like, anybody else we want to jam into this segment right here? So it was just crazy. I love John Carpenter, although I do think that he is one of the weak links here. His wraparound, his performance is just it's pretty flat, and it just didn't work for me.
It has everybody I love in it. All these horror icons, all these directors. Toby Hooper shows up. I mean, come on. It's got everybody in it, but this is like the Adam Sandler's grown-ups of horror movies. Because it's almost like an excuse to have a party with all your favorite people, right? But then they forgot to do any kind of story that was worth it. Every story in this, I was like, it's not scary. It's goofy, kind of entertaining. And I don't hate this movie, but it just seems like such a wasted opportunity when you have this much talent attached to it. I mean, this is one of the movies that upset me the most just because it was a lack of talent. After Midnight, very little talent in it. And I think they tried harder. All the talent in the world, just didn't seem like they tried hard enough.
On the record, this is the first movie that Maddie has bagged this entire time.
I know.
And of course, it happens to be my favorite. So, you know what? You know what? Ghosts are not real.
What?
Dead.
All right,
I will
10 out of 10.
I will pander my butt off to the highest bidder.
No one's mentioned my personal favorite cameo, which is David Warner, who I absolutely adore. The minute he's popped on screen, I was like, oh, this is great. But no, I really liked this film. It's just that other stuff was better for me. This was a lot of fun. I loved the first segment with the whole stalkeriness happening in Haddonfield. I was like, we're name dropping all these things. All these different icons popping up all over the place. It was a lot of fun. I hadn't seen this one before, so I was pleasantly surprised by it. I think everybody should watch it. It's cool. It's fun. It's a great way to spend an hour and a half.
Okay, so that now takes us up into number 4. Again, not a lot of points in between number 5 and number 4, because with 94 points, we've got The House That Dripped Blood. This one did very well, although it was ranked dead last one time, although it was also ranked number 1 one time as well. On the panel, Clay had it ranked the lowest, and when I say the lowest, I mean 4th place, which is still a very good score. And then me, Sarah, and Matt all gave it 2nd place. Obviously, tons of appreciation for this one.
I really love almost every single movie on this list. It was so hard to put them in order. And this movie is such, like I said before, comfort food. You put it on, the stories take their time, which is not something that happens a lot nowadays. There's a nice build-up. It's not screaming at you. It's not in your face. You can cuddle up and watch these, and you're like, oh, that's fun. Or, oh, man, I love. And that, just the actors in this, just, I could watch Peter Cushing do anything. I could watch Christopher Lee do anything, and it would entertain me. I have so much fun with all of the Amicus. It's British horror at its finest. It's the 70s. It's beautiful. They take their time. The acting's great. The stories are fun. It's just, I put it on late at night, cuddle up, and watch it and have a great time. And my wife, who hates horror movies, she could watch these with me and have a great time. And there's something to be said about that as well.
You can't go wrong with an Amicus anthology movie. You just can't. And the Amicus ones, my husband, who also hates horror, will watch these with me. You've got it all built around one set piece. It's the house. It's all these things that have happened in the house and all of these fun things that go on. And it's got people from Doctor Who in it. You've got the 3rd Doctor in the last piece. Come on. And he's basically wearing his 3rd Doctor costume. It's fantastic. It's so much fun. It's classic storytelling. I have such a soft spot for anything that is British horror. Like, they know how to tell a good ghost story. They know how to do it, and without showing you a heck of a lot. Like, they give you that atmosphere, and they give you characters that you care about and you're invested in, and it makes for such a great time, and I think that's why I love it so much.
You can't not watch this without realizing that this is the framework, that this was like those Amicus anthologies were basically setting forth the formula for how anthology movies would kind of play out up until today. And those stories were great. I mean, it was if you used to read, like, the EC comics when you were younger, and the old creepies and everything like that, and obviously the Tales from the Crypt comics and things, watching this movie is exactly that same feeling as flipping through one of those comic books. The blood is not the only thing that is dripping from this house. It is also dripping with atmosphere, and it just feels great. Performance-wise, you're getting all guns. Stories just worked really well. I love it.
Here we go. So, haunted house movies, and this is while an anthology movie, it is a haunted, possessed house. There has never been a haunted house movie that completely enraptured me. So it's not my favorite haunted house movie, but I have a great appreciation for that concept, for that wraparound. The stories in between work so well, and they're so much fun to watch, and they're very Hitchcockian in this film. I think more so than the other Amicus films. The last one, the vampire one, love me some Pertwee, but I think that one was probably my least favorite, while still being very good. It's my least favorite of the stories in the film, but altogether, I completely knocked my socks off. But this movie, make no mistake, just because it's fourth does not mean that it is not absolutely deserving of number one.
So that now takes us into the top three. We're getting into the gold here. Although the points are still not drastically low. Just showing how contentious this competition was. Because at number 3, with 87 points, is Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. Which was, again, one of the other movies no one ranked it dead last. That was ranked number 1 3 times. On this panel, we all ranked it pretty high. And Matt had it in 3rd place. Clay had it in 2nd place. And Sarah, this was your number 1. So tell us how you feel about Dr. Terror's House of Horrors.
It's the first Amicus anthology. You've got Peter Cushing. You've got Christopher Lee. You've got just this wealth of talent in it. Donald Sutherland, such a good one. I mean, everybody's thrown into this one little train car and suddenly pulling out tarot cards, and then you get through all of these crazy things like werewolves, creeping vines, you've got voodoo. It is my childhood. That's one of the ones I was allowed to watch as a kid. So it's one of the first real horror movies outside of the Universal horrors that I was allowed to watch. And you just can't get any better than that, in my opinion. It's got such a special place in my heart and in horror history. That's why it got number 1 for me.
For me, this one got dropped down to 3rd, only because I felt as if the endings of these stories lacked some of the punch that the House of Drip Blood endings had. A couple of these endings just felt like, let's just end it here. Again, same thing. You've got this great little wraparound story that ties things together pretty well. It does actually feel like its own thing and sort of feel as if it's like, a storyteller telling different stories for each character, but it does all tie into that greater whole of where they're all going.
I want to point out something very interesting about this film. I also have a background in theater. My degree's in musical theater. And the choreographer for the voodoo section is Bosco Holder, who is the older brother of the more famous Jeffrey Holder, who is Baron Samedi in Live and Let Die, which is very reminiscent of the voodoo section of this film. Okay, so that's my theater bit. So my nerdiness. Hire me. So again, incredible casting in this film. Peter Cushing, I think we can just give it up to him as, the king of horror anthologies. He's
Yes.
got, as Christopher Lee is, one of the gods for playing Dracula for so long. The funniest thing that happened in this movie, like where I had to pause and go back and rewatch the segment. The only time that I've done this in this anthology list was during the voodoo section, and the guy is watching the voodoo thing happen, and every time it goes to the dancing and then comes back to him, there's another black dude behind him every single time, and it does this 6 times. A new black guy behind him, and some white guy in the 60s doesn't know that there's a black dude behind him. Give it a break. That, to me, I mean, I just could not stop laughing, and I went back and watched it. This movie completely works for me. That's why it ranks so high.
This movie it's so awesome. Just the setup and the acting, and it really is. It's just everyone playing off each other. Everyone's obviously having a great time. The only thing I could possibly add to what you've all said is that I like to look at like what's going on maybe behind the camera. Like when that vine's being brought in through the window is just some dude with like a string, or like when exactly. Or when like they're putting out the fire, it's just a bunch of people with branches hitting the ground. But it works, and it's so much fun, and you're having fun because they're obviously having fun. And I feel faith in humanity slowly coming back into my body. Yes, I'm so glad this was high, because I expected this one to be low.
So that now takes us to the top 2. And are you ready for this? We have a tie for first place. Both movies that are remaining got 60 points each, and those movies are Trick or Treat and Tales from the Crypt. Both of them got 60 points. So, we need a tiebreaker.
Hello, kiddies. It's your old pal, the Crypt Keeper, coming to you from the Halloween Hole for an exclusive Dead Last Tiebreaker. Because it seems this panel can't decide which anthology is the bigger scream. 2007's Trick or Treat or 1972's Tales from the Crypt. Now, I know my vote is of grave importance, and I don't exactly have an unbiased opinion. But if you ask this fiend, the choice between these 2 horror anthologies isn't even a contest at all. Because with Grimsdyke, a murderous Santa Claus, a dog named Shane, and Joan Collins, your number 1 anthology is obviously Tales from the Crypt.
All right, so there you have it. Trick or Treat takes second place with 60 points. The lowest rank that this movie had was 6th place. It was ranked in 6th twice. It was ranked number 1 5 times. It was pretty decent scoring there. On the panel, Clay, you had it ranked pretty low in 6th place. Matt, you had it in 5th place. And Sarah and I both had it in 4th place. And I think that this might be because technically this movie does sort of get a first place spot. I think this might be the first time that none of the panel have picked it in the top 3 even. And I do want to say real quick that this is the second movie on this list that I want to like more than I actually do. I do have to say that this is an extremely well-made movie. I love the way that it interweaves the storyline. I know that a lot of people will just use the Pulp Fiction thing, whatever, but Pulp Fiction is not the first movie to do that. The atmosphere is all over the place in this one. It embodies Halloween. It just, everything about it feels Halloween. There's so much good going on in this movie. So why don't I really like it? And I think that it comes down to me is, I think it's the characters. There's no character for me to really get behind and like. Everybody's kind of despicable, but not really in a charming way. So I don't really feel as if I get behind enough people in it. Oddly enough, there's movies on this list that I ranked lower that I would probably rather watch more than this one. But ultimately, this is a much better made. This is a really, really well made movie. So I have to give it a little bit higher nod. But yeah, there's just something about it that I just don't love watching.
What a lineup for the cast. I mean, you got some Oscar winners there. You got Anna Paquin, you got Brian Cox, you got Dylan Baker does not get the respect that Dylan Baker deserves. And Dylan Baker deserves all the Dylan Baker respect. Just so everybody understands that Dylan Baker is awesome. Leslie Bibb, who is glorious. I love her. It was also very weird to add Dylan Baker into both, have him in his own story, and then to also make him the victim of the werewolves as a way to kind of have him get his comeuppance for killing children. I thought that was strange. The little pumpkin boy, Sam. Sorry, excuse me. Yes, of course, Dylan Baker, Sam. Yeah, I was not expecting him to actually be like a pumpkin face underneath the bag. I thought it was going to be like one of the children who died in the bus and be like a mangled little child. I absolutely hated the story of the kids going down the elevator shaft to go down and scare the idiot savant girl. I hated that. And they all got what they deserved. Good. I'm glad they're all dead. I'm glad all those children are dead. Not the children on the bus, but those kids who tried and scared that little girl. I'm glad they're all dead, and I hope they stay dead.
Clay is really glad that a bunch of fictional kids
yes,
who didn't actually do a fictional thing have died.
Good. They're good. I'm glad they're dead. Yeah. Dylan Baker.
The atmosphere in this movie is great. It's got a great Halloween atmosphere. It puts you kind of there. You're like, oh, it's a great Halloween town. It's almost like an R-rated Hocus Pocus, right? But it's got parts in this movie where I was looking at my phone, like, all right, are we going to get on with it? I kind of know where this is going. It's not really engaging me. That being said, it looks beautiful. The acting's great. I just think this guy needs to work on pacing. It's not that I dislike it. I actually think it's really well done and fun. It's just, to me, on a list with this many heavy hitters, it doesn't even compete.
I mean, I love Trick or Treat. It's very Halloween, and I love a movie that feels like Halloween. And in my notes to Josh, Clay, I literally was like, I love Dylan Baker. And you're absolutely right. He does not get the recognition he deserves. He's so phenomenal. And I love him in this role. Like, his segment is my favorite segment of the entire thing. Just the back and forth that he has with trying to keep people from figuring out that he's killing folks because it's so ridiculous. I also agree that the children deserve to die. Although I, as I was watching it, I'd seen it before, but I didn't remember a lot of how the stories played out exactly. And that one I could not remember for the life of me how it ended. And I thought going into it that the little girl was going to be a ghost. Like she was a ghost of one of the kids that had been killed in the school bus. And I looked it up, and that apparently was the original plan for that story. And they changed it. Fourth place was as high as I could rank this because you have 3 Amicus anthologies on here. And those were always going to be my top 3. You can't beat Amicus. I'm sorry.
So that now gives us our number 1 movie. Also with 60 points is Tales from the Crypt from 1972, the movie that I guess led off to quite a few other anthology worlds. I think when most people think of horror anthologies, they think of Tales from the Crypt. Obviously inspired by the old TV show, but it all started right here with this movie. The lowest ranking that it had, just like Trick or Treat, was 6th place, which was ranked twice in 6th place, exactly like Trick or Treat. But it was ranked number 1 6 times, which is one more than Trick or Treat did. So obviously, I guess, it maybe deserved the number 1 spot after all. On the panel, Clay and Sarah had it ranked the lowest, but when I say the lowest, I mean 3rd place. And me and Matt had it as number 1, obviously our favorites as well. So Matty, this is your number 1. How do you feel?
I love this movie. And certain movies take you to certain places of when you were growing up. And for me, I used to sneak out of bed and go watch like late night TBS. I think it was one of those things, you know what I mean? And they had a double feature one night of Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror. And I'm like, Tales from the Crypt, but this isn't the Crypt Keeper from HBO or any of this. So what is this? And that movie scared the crap out of 10-year-old me. Like watching it in the dark by yourself at like 2 a.m. when no one else knows you're watching this. The Santa Claus killer in this one is 10 times scarier than the one from the HBO one ever could hope to be, because that's a real dude. And then the Grimsdyke zombie, when that thing scared the hell out of me. It's just the way it comes at the camera in that scene. That whole story is so good because Peter Cushing makes you feel so bad for him. And only an amazing actor could do that. Even the blind hospital, that guy's so evil that you can't wait. You can't wait. I mean, I feel bad about what they did to the dogs in that scene, but it's still such a great, just wrap up. Just the acting, the mood, the pacing, everything is perfect. I mean, if it wasn't number 1, I don't know. I would feel it got robbed, but since it is, I feel so much better.
I don't think any movie has ever nailed the atmosphere of those classic EC comics as much as this did. I don't even think the TV show managed to nail that as much as the movie did. I thought the wraparound was great and interesting and kind of fun. The monkey's paw story took this whole classic thing that you know already, but it gave it a unique twist. And I'd seen this before, but it still feels fresh. If that twist was in a current movie, I think it would still have that same surprise effect. And I gotta say, for people talking about how this is an old movie and old movies don't have the gusto that modern movies have or anything like that, you're gonna tell me that razor blade wall scene didn't feel like something straight out of Saw? I mean, come on now, that is just the whole thought of that, and they didn't even need to show you anything, but just the thought of that happening was enough. I love the old Tales from the Crypt TV show, but this just nails it 100%.
Every single episode of within this particular one, they're all heavy hitters. They're fantastic. You've got star power behind them, such phenomenal character actors like Patrick McGee in the Tales from the Blind. Oh my gosh. And I did not remember that one. So as I'm watching it, I'm like, oh my gosh, what in the world is going to happen? And I'm just sitting here, and my husband was watching this one with me too, and he's just like, this is brutal. And I'm like, yeah. And you don't think of a movie anthology from 1970s being brutal, and yet this one is brutal, but in the best way. I don't feel icky after having watched it. I feel energized and oh my gosh, that was fantastic. It's the original Tales from the Crypt, hands down. Can't go wrong.
This one, of course, it's a classic. You watch it and okay, I totally understand. There's nothing about it that's no, this doesn't hold up well. This kind of doesn't work anymore. It all works. It all works. And the fact that my name is not Grimsdyke also makes me sad all day long, because what a cool freaking name. But some more trivia, because I like to find out what's going on behind the scenes. Peter Cushing was actually dealing with the loss of his wife at the time.
Yeah.
So he was being himself. So the feelings that you get from him, Maddie, are so correct, because he's just playing his dark self, at the time. I knew how great he was. I knew that he was in all these movies. I had just never seen them, but I've always had an appreciation for him. There's nothing to condemn about this. There's nothing that I can get in there and say, this does not work anymore. It all freaking works. And it was so shocking to me that it held my attention the entire time. I didn't even look at my phone at all during this movie. And you wish that you could find movies today that could do the same thing. And I have not been able to find one unless I'm at the movie theater. I won't pick up my phone at the movie theater. But watching movies at home, especially this last year, I defy anybody to tell me that they have found a movie this year that's been made in the last 20 years that they didn't have their phone in their hand the entire time. But it wouldn't be one of these Amicus films for sure.
All right, so there you have it. There's our list, 10 movies ranked up, and let's take a look at the list. I think that I feel pretty good about this. There was nothing on this that I strongly disagree with or am mad about. I know that there's probably going to be some contention in the comments about Trick or Treat not getting that number one spot. I can feel it, but it's tied for number one. So what can you do? Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I know I enjoyed talking about these movies quite a bit. I enjoyed watching these movies even more. This is the last regular episode of this season of Dead Last. Next month's episode will be the year-end wrap-up Dead Last of Dead Lasts, which I'm very much looking forward to, where we rank all of the worst Dead Last movies that have been ranked for the past year. So I hope you're ready for that. I do want to thank you guys for watching this. Please leave your comments down below about how you thought about this. You can also obviously like the video, subscribe, check out my Patreon page. These are my patrons. These guys help keep this channel going, and the patrons do get to vote every single month in Dead Last and send in their rankings, which you can do as well too. I want to thank all the patrons for just being patrons and also for sending in your rankings. It really helps make this show. But also, I want to thank my panel. Thank you guys very much for coming on board and doing this. This was a lot of fun. Did you guys enjoy talking about these movies?
Yeah.
It's so much fun.
Yeah. Not as much fun as Dylan Baker would have had, but still quite a bit of fun. Well, that's it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you very shortly for another great episode of Dead Last, and there are no ghosts. Bye-bye.
Dylan Baker.